This timeline tracks the incoming wave of regulatory updates hitting the medical device and pharmaceutical industries. It begins with the adoption of ICH E6R3 for clinical trials in 2025 and extends out to August 2027 for the EU AI Act's high-risk device requirements. But sitting directly in the middle is February 2, 2026. This is when the FDA's new Quality Management System regulation retires the decades-old 21 CFR 820 framework, replacing it entirely with ISO 13485-2016. For U.S. medical device manufacturers, this is an immediate, non-negotiable mandate. Every active quality system must transition to meet strict ISO standards. Legacy quality systems treat compliance as a passive repository of documents, relying on human beings to remember procedures, manually route paperwork, and check for errors. As regulatory complexity scales, passive documentation breaks down. Companies relying on outdated tools to navigate this transition expose themselves to catastrophic audit risks. This diagram illustrates the data architecture of QAtrial version 3.0. It is engineered specifically as the operational bridge for the QMSR transition. Traditional tools rely on procedural compliance. They expect users to perfectly memorize and execute a written quality manual or standard operating procedure. Human error in these manual processes is a primary driver of FDA audit findings. Version 3.0 operates on structural compliance. The software environment itself is built so that executing a non-compliant action is literally impossible. To achieve this rigid control, the entire system must be architected from the ground up, anchoring every workflow to a single, validated regulatory requirement. The first bottleneck in any regulatory transition is data ingestion. Quality teams spend hundreds of manual hours decomposing dense paragraphs of regulatory text into individual, testable engineering requirements. This animation shows QAtrial's new AI extraction prompt at work. You paste a block of regulatory text, and the system automatically parses it into discrete requirements. Each is automatically assigned a risk level and a regulatory reference tag. The AI handles the initial decomposition, but the user retains final oversight to review, modify, and accept the extracted data. This extraction is powered by new LLM provider settings, featuring 5 one-click presets. You can select cloud providers like Anthropic or OpenAI, or route through local setups using Ollama and LM Studio. Local models bypass external servers entirely, no API key required. Cloud configurations default to lower temperatures for high regulatory precision. Local models use slightly higher temperatures and lower token limits to optimize smaller on-premise performance. Deterministic, configurable AI ingestion accelerates project timelines, and by utilizing local hardware presets, sensitive intellectual property never leaves your own servers. Once those requirements are ingested, they must be mapped against all 27 clauses of ISO 13485 to identify compliance gaps. This split screen visualizes the 2 analysis modes. On the left is keyword match mode. It scans requirement titles and descriptions against curated, static lists of terminology for each specific ISO clause. The scoring logic is deterministic. 0 matches is a gap, 1 is partial, 2 or more is covered. AI analysis mode runs a deeper semantic check. It connects the core intent of a regulatory clause to a requirement satisfying the rule, without exact keywords. These dual inputs feed directly into the readiness progress bar, actively shifting the score from yellow partials to green covered states. When gaps are identified, a single click auto-generates a new placeholder requirement, pre-filled with the correct ISO 13485 regulatory reference and risk tags. Layering deterministic keyword mapping with semantic AI analysis eliminates hundreds of hours of manual gap assessment without the risk of hallucinating compliance. Abstract requirements must eventually become active engineering. Version 3.0 introduces a formal design control tab featuring a 7-phase Kanban board, tracking everything from initial user needs down to the released state. Each design input card centralizes critical metadata, displaying a live status badge, the total count of linked requirements, and the number of associated tests. In standard operations, engineers often attempt to push design items into the next phase before securing formal review. Here, the system structurally halts forward motion. The interface physically rejects moving any card marked in review to the next phase. The Advance button is completely disabled until the current phase secures full approval. Because phase advancement is tied strictly to the approved state of the item rather than user permissions, it is mechanically impossible to drag and drop your way around an FDA audit requirement. Looking closely at the flowchart controlling that locked state, we see the underlying logic of the new workflow engine. It builds sequential gates, requiring specific roles to sign off in a precise order. The default design gate review workflow requires 3 distinct steps: an initial review, a secondary multi-person approval, and a final signature. The system evaluates multi-approver logic strictly. Forward progression is granted only when the exact required number of independent approvals is secured. If a single approver rejects the item, consensus is broken. The forward chain shatters and instantly resets the process back to step 1. To prevent bottlenecks, the Integrated Notification Center alerts assigned team members to pending actions and workflow escalations in real time. This strict, consensus-based reset logic directly mirrors the rigorous expectations required to pass a pharmaceutical or medical device audit. This diagram shows how micro-level approvals compile into macro-level regulatory outputs. Requirements, tests, and approvals flow downward, organizing themselves into version-controlled vaults for the design history file, device master record, and device history record. The design history file compiles all of these generated records, documenting a continuous, unbroken chain of traceability from the first user need to the final released product. While structural compliance requires rigid gating, organizations still operate with unique internal data structures. The introduction of custom fields allows teams to add specialized metadata, like specific batch numbers or product families, directly to requirement and test records without modifying or breaking the core database schema. Pairing strict structural gating with custom metadata provides the unbroken compliance regulators demand, alongside the operational flexibility businesses require. QAtrial version 3.0 provides the immediate, concrete tools required to solve the February 2026 FDA QMSR mandate. Looking ahead, this architectural map expands. Releases 3.1 and 3.2 will introduce enterprise collaboration tools like WebSocket-based live editing, alongside advanced clinical capabilities, including an electronic trial master file. These future clinical and enterprise features will be built directly upon the exact same structurally compliant foundation deployed today. Version 3.0 marks the definitive point where QA